The first gunshot split the dawn air like thunder, jerking Zeke Blackburn awake from his makeshift camp beneath a lonely cottonwood. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for deep sleep, especially not for a man riding alone through Apache country with a price on his head. Zeke grabbed his Winchester, heart hammering against his ribs. A second shot echoed, then a woman's scream pierced the morning silence. Without hesitation, he swung onto his dun gelding, spurring toward the commotion. Cresting a ridge, he spotted a broken-down wagon in the wash below. A woman with honey-colored hair crouched behind it, desperately reloading a revolver as two mounted men circled like wolves. The wagon's canvas cover bore bullet holes, and a man's body lay motionless beside one wheel. "Keep riding, stranger," one of the attackers called out when he spotted Zeke. "This ain't your business," Zeke's response came from his rifle barrel. The shot knocked the speaker from his saddle. The second attacker wheeled his horse and fired wildly before retreating in a cloud of dust. The woman kept her gun trained on Zeke as he approached, her hands steady despite the tear tracks on her dust-smeared face. "Name's Zeke Blackburn, madam. I mean no harm." "Emma Galloway," she replied, lowering her weapon slightly. "That was my brother they killed," her voice cracked. "We were headed to Silver Creek to start fresh." Zeke dismounted slowly. The dead man's resemblance to Emma was unmistakable, same strong jawline, same golden hair. "I'm sorry for your loss. Tyler was all I had left." Emma's composure finally broke, a sob escaping her lips before she stiffened, forcing control. "And now?" Her hand went to her midsection in a protective gesture. Zeke followed her gaze to the wagon's interior. There, bundled in blankets, lay a newborn infant, impossibly tiny and red-faced. "My niece," Emma explained. "Sarah was born just yesterday. Tyler's wife died bringing her into this world." The reality of the situation hit Zeke like a physical blow. A woman alone with a newborn, miles from civilization, brother dead in dangerous territory. "Those men?" he asked, checking the horizon. "You know them?" Emma shook her head. "Road agents, I think. They wanted our horses, supplies, everything." Zeke assessed their situation with a grim expression. "We need to bury your brother, then get you and that baby somewhere safe." As the sun climbed higher, they laid Tyler Galloway to rest beneath a stand of mesquite trees. Emma recited what prayers she could remember, clutching her brother's Bible in trembling hands. "He was taking us to Silver Creek," she explained as they worked. "Said he had a claim there, a future for us all. I was a schoolteacher back in Kansas before everything fell apart." Zeke said nothing as he tamped down the last of the earth over the grave. His own past was a weight he'd been outrunning for years. With the baby wrapped securely against Emma's chest, they salvaged what they could from the wagon. One wheel was shattered beyond repair, the axle cracked. "Silver Creek's 3 days' ride," Zeke said, securing their supplies to his horse. "Nearest settlement's Bitter Springs, maybe a day west." Emma's face paled. "I can't ride that far, not with Sarah." The infant's tiny whimpers punctuated her words, and Zeke saw the exhaustion etched in every line of Emma's face. She'd given birth, lost her sister-in-law, and now her brother in the span of 2 days. "We'll make camp here tonight," he decided. "Get moving at first light." As darkness fell, Zeke kept watch while Emma tended to the baby. The child's cries echoed across the empty landscape, setting his teeth on edge. He'd spent years avoiding attachments, responsibilities. The open territory was his only companion, the constant movement his salvation. Yet here he was, trapped by circumstance and something else he couldn't name. "She won't settle," Emma said, frustration and exhaustion in her voice. "I don't know what she needs." Before he could stop himself, Zeke held out his arms. "Let me try." Surprise flickered across Emma's face, but she carefully transferred the swaddled infant to his waiting hands. The baby felt impossibly light. Zeke cradled her awkwardly, remembering long ago days watching his mother with his younger siblings. He began to rock gently, humming a half-forgotten melody. Sarah's cries softened, then ceased altogether as her tiny fist curled against his weather-roughened hand. Something unfamiliar expanded in Zeke's chest as he looked down at the peaceful face. He held the newborn and whispered, "Guess God knew I needed something to keep me soft." Emma's gaze met his across the firelight, a question in her eyes. "A man gets hard out here alone," he explained, uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "Forget what matters." "Why are you alone, Mr. Blackburn?" Zeke's jaw tightened. "That's a long story, madam. We have all night," Emma replied, "and I'd like to know the man who's helping us." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the soft sounds of the sleeping baby. "I killed a man," Zeke finally said, his voice low. 5 years ago in Tucson. He deserved it was beating a saloon girl half to death, but he was the son of a territorial judge. Emma's expression remained steady. "And you've been running since. There's a price on my head, $500. Is that why you helped us, hoping for a reward?" The accusation stung, though he couldn't blame her for the suspicion. "No, madam. Some things a man just does because they need doing." Emma studied him for a long moment. "I believe you, Mr. Blackburn." "Zeke," he corrected. "Just Zeke." Dawn brought new challenges. Sarah woke hungry and wailing. Emma had been trying to feed her with a cloth soaked in watered-down condensed milk, but the baby was struggling. "We need a wet nurse," Emma said, desperation edging her voice. "Or goat's milk. Something." Zeke knew the odds of finding either in the desert were slim. "Bitter Springs is our best hope. Can you ride?" Emma nodded, though her face was drawn with exhaustion. "I have to." They fashioned a sling for Sarah from a shawl, securing her against Emma's chest. Zeke helped Emma onto his gelding, then gathered the reins of Tyler's remaining horse, loaded with their salvaged supplies. The sun beat down mercilessly as they traveled westward. Zeke kept a vigilant watch, aware of the dangers that lurked in the seemingly empty landscape: Apache warriors, outlaws, rattlesnakes, and the most deadly of all, the unforgiving heat. By midday, Emma was swaying in the saddle, her face flushed. Sarah had fallen into an uneasy silence that worried Zeke more than her crying. "We need shade," he decided, leading them toward a rocky outcropping that promised some relief from the sun. As Emma dismounted, her legs buckled. Zeke caught her before she hit the ground, alarmed by the heat radiating from her skin. "You're burning up," he said, helping her to sit in the shadow of the rocks. "I'm fine," Emma insisted, though her glazed eyes told a different story. "Just tired." Zeke dampened a bandana with precious water from their canteen, placing it on her forehead. "You've got fever, childbed fever maybe." Emma's eyes widened with fear. "I can't get sick. Sarah needs me. You both need rest and proper care." Zeke made a decision. "I'm going to find help." "Don't leave us," Emma whispered, clutching his arm with surprising strength. "I'll be back before sundown," he promised. "You have your brother's revolver," she nodded weakly. "Use it if you have to. 3 shots in the air if there's trouble." With a last look at the woman and child huddled in the meager shade, Zeke mounted and rode hard toward the west, pushing his horse to its limits. 2 hours of brutal riding brought him to a small ranch nestled in a hidden valley. A Mexican woman drawing water from a well looked up in alarm as he approached. "Please," Zeke called out in halting Spanish. "I need help. A woman, a baby." The woman's expression changed from fear to concern. She called toward the adobe house and a man emerged, rifle ready. "State your business," the rancher demanded. "Name's Zeke Blackburn. I've got a woman and newborn baby out there." He gestured eastward. "Woman's sick with fever. Baby needs milk." The rancher lowered his weapon slightly. "I'm Daniel Reed. This is my wife, Maria." Maria spoke rapidly to her husband in Spanish. "My wife says to bring them here," Reed translated. "We have goat's milk for the baby. She knows something of healing." Relief washed over Zeke. "Thank you. They're about 2 hours back at the Red Rocks." "You go," Maria insisted in accented English. "I prepare." Reed offered Zeke a fresh horse. "I'll ride with you. These hills aren't safe for a lone woman and child." The sun was low on the horizon when they returned to the outcropping. For one terrible moment, Zeke thought they'd arrived too late. There was no sign of Emma or Sarah. "Emma," he called, fear tightening his throat. A weak voice answered from deeper in the rocks. Zeke found them in a small natural hollow. Emma had dragged herself further into the shade, the baby clutched protectively to her chest. "You came back," she whispered, relief flooding her fever-bright eyes. "I promised I would." Zeke knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "We've found help." With gentle care, they transported Emma and Sarah to the Reed Ranch. Maria took charge immediately, ushering Emma to a small bedroom and examining the baby with experienced hands. "The mother is very sick," she told Zeke later that evening. "The child needs milk strength. Will they survive?" Zeke asked bluntly. Maria crossed herself. "With God's help. I have sent Daniel for the doctor in Bitter Springs." For 3 days, Zeke paced the small ranch house while Maria tended to Emma and the baby. When not hovering anxiously outside the sickroom, he made himself useful repairing fences and chopping wood, working out his fear and frustration through physical labor. On the 3rd night, as he sat on the porch staring at the stars, Maria emerged with Sarah in her arms. "She is hungry," Maria said, offering the baby to him. "I must tend to Emma, you feed." Zeke took the infant awkwardly, along with the small bottle of goat's milk Maria handed him. "How's Emma? The fever breaks, I think, but she is weak." Left alone with Sarah, Zeke settled into a rocking chair. The baby's blue eyes seemed to study him as he carefully positioned the bottle. "You're a fighter, little one," he murmured as she drank eagerly. "Just like your aunt." Something shifted in his chest as Sarah's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. He'd spent years hardening himself against the world, building walls to protect the wounded parts of himself. Yet this tiny scrap of humanity had somehow slipped past all his defenses. At dawn, Maria finally allowed him to see Emma. She lay pale against the pillows, but her eyes were clear when they met his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving us." Zeke took her hand, surprised by the surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "You're not out of the woods yet. But we're alive, thanks to you." The doctor arrived from Bitter Springs that afternoon, a gruff older man named Hollis who examined Emma thoroughly. "Childbed fever, as you suspected," he told Zeke afterward, "though she wasn't the one who gave birth. Must have been exposed while helping her sister-in-law. Will she recover? The worst has passed. Mrs. Reed's treatments were effective. A week of rest should see her back on her feet." Relief coursed through Zeke. Only then did he realize how deeply he'd come to care for Emma and Sarah in their short time together. As Emma regained her strength, Zeke found himself at a crossroads. The logical choice was to continue his solitary existence once Emma was well enough to travel. Silver Creek was less than 2 days' ride from the Reed Ranch. He could escort them there safely, then be on his way. Yet each day that passed made that option more painful to contemplate. He found excuses to spend time with Emma as she recovered, bringing her wildflowers he'd gathered while riding the range, reading to her from one of Mrs. Reed's dog-eared novels, or simply sitting beside her bed while she held Sarah. "Tell me about your life before," Emma asked him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Sarah slept peacefully in a cradle Mr. Reed had crafted. "Not much to tell. Born in Missouri. Family moved to Arizona Territory when I was 12. Lost my parents to smallpox 3 years later. Your siblings?" Sister married a farmer near Tucson. Brother died in a mining accident. Haven't seen Marie in 5 years, not since. He trailed off. Since you became a wanted man," Emma finished softly. Zeke nodded, staring at the darkening horizon. "What about you? You said you were a school teacher?" Emma's smile held a trace of sadness. "In a small town outside Topeka. My parents died when I was 16. Tyler was all I had left. When his wife Rachel became pregnant, he wrote asking me to join them out west." Her voice faltered. "He said we could be a family again." "What will you do now?" Zeke asked, the question that had been haunting him for days. Emma looked down at the sleeping baby. Tyler's claim in Silver Creek is still valid. I have his papers. The town needs a schoolteacher according to his letters. You'd raise Sarah alone? I don't have much choice. She's my responsibility now. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Zeke wanted to offer another option but held back, aware of the burden his outlaw status would place on her and the child. Another week passed, and Emma grew stronger each day. Sarah thrived on the goat's milk, gaining weight and becoming more alert. Zeke found himself increasingly drawn to the infant, volunteering to feed her and rock her to sleep. The simple trust in her eyes when she looked at him stirred something profound in his soul. Maria watched him with knowing eyes. "You love them," she said one evening as he walked the floor with a fussing Sarah. Zeke couldn't deny it. "Doesn't matter. I can't offer them anything but danger." "El amor encuentra un camino," Maria replied. "Love finds a way." The morning Emma announced she was ready to travel to Silver Creek, Zeke felt as though a physical weight had settled on his chest. "I'll escort you," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Make sure you get settled safely." Emma's expression was unreadable. "You don't need to do that." "You've done more than enough already." "I'd like to," Zeke insisted. "Please." Their departure from the Reed Ranch was emotional. Maria embraced Emma tightly, pressing a packet of herbs into her hands and giving her instructions for Sarah's care. Daniel Reed surprised Zeke with the gift of a sturdy packhorse loaded with supplies. "For the woman and child," Reed said, waving away Zeke's protests. "We have been blessed. We share our blessings." They traveled slowly toward Silver Creek, making frequent stops for Sarah's care. The journey that should have taken less than 2 days stretched to 3, each mile bringing them closer to an inevitable parting that neither seemed eager to reach. On the final night before they would reach town, they camped beside a clear stream. Sarah slept peacefully as Emma and Zeke sat beside the fire, the unspoken future hanging between them. "I could stay," Zeke said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Help you build a place, just until you're settled." Emma looked up, hope and caution warring in her eyes. "You'd be recognized eventually. It's dangerous for you. Worth the risk." The words surprised him as much as her. "Why?" Emma asked softly. Zeke struggled to articulate the transformation that had occurred within him since finding her and Sarah in the desert. 5 years running, I forgot what it meant to have something worth staying for." Emma's eyes glistened in the firelight. "And now I look at you and Sarah and I remember." She reached across the space between them, her fingers finding his. "I'm afraid, Zeke. Afraid of building hopes on shifting sand." "I can't promise it'll be easy," he admitted, "but I can promise I'll fight for you both with everything I have." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and answer exchanged in the language of touch. When they parted, Emma's smile held a certainty that hadn't been there before. "We'll find a way," she whispered. Silver Creek proved to be smaller than Zeke had imagined, a dusty collection of buildings surrounded by scattered homesteads and mining claims. The townsfolk viewed the arrival of Emma, Sarah, and Zeke with curiosity and cautious welcome. Tyler's claim was 3 miles outside town, a small cabin beside a creek with good water and fertile soil. The structure was sound but neglected, requiring substantial work to make it properly habitable. Zeke threw himself into the labor, repairing the roof, building furniture, and clearing land for a garden. He introduced himself to neighbors and townspeople as Emma's husband, Zeke Galloway, a fiction that felt increasingly like a future he desperately wanted. Emma quickly established herself in the community. The town had no formal school, but she began teaching children in their cabin 3 days a week. Her natural warmth and intelligence earned her respect, while Sarah became the darling of every woman in the settlement. For 6 months, they built a life together. Zeke worked the land during the day and held Sarah at night, marveling at her growth and the way her smile could dissolve every hardness within him. His feelings for Emma deepened into a love more profound than he had believed possible. Yet the shadow of his past remained. He grew a beard and avoided traveling to larger settlements where he might be recognized. Each time a stranger rode into Silver Creek, tension knotted his stomach until they departed. "You can't live like this forever," Emma told him one night after Sarah had fallen asleep. "Looking over your shoulder using another man's name, I know," Zeke admitted, "but I don't see another way." Emma sat beside him on the porch steps, her hand finding his. "What if there is?" "The new territorial governor is reforming the justice system. They say he's reviewing old cases, particularly those with questionable judgments." Hope flickered dangerously in Zeke's chest. "Where did you hear this?" Mrs. Thornton's son is a lawyer in Tucson. "She mentioned it when I was in town yesterday." Emma squeezed his hand. "You defended an innocent woman, Zeke. Maybe it's time to stop running and fight for your name." The thought terrified him not for himself, but for what failure would mean for Emma and Sarah, if it doesn't work. "Then we'll face that together," Emma said firmly. "But I believe in you, Zeke Blackburn, and I believe in justice." 2 weeks later, Zeke rode into Tucson, heart hammering against his ribs. He'd written ahead to Emma's contact, arranging to meet with the young lawyer at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Andrew Thornton proved to be a serious young man with intelligent eyes and a surprisingly pragmatic approach. "Your case has merit, Mr. Blackburn," he said after hearing Zeke's story. "The judge's son had a history of violence against women. 2 witnesses are willing to testify that you acted to save the woman's life. Will that be enough?" Zeke asked, hardly daring to hope. "The governor is particularly concerned with cases where family connections influence judgments. Judge Harrington's vendetta against you is well known in legal circles." Thornton hesitated. "It won't be easy, and you'll likely need to surrender yourself to authorities while we petition for a review." The prospect of imprisonment, even temporarily, sent a chill through Zeke. "How long?" "A month, perhaps longer." Thornton's expression was sympathetic. "You have a family now, I understand." "A woman I love and a child who needs me," Zeke confirmed. "I can't leave them alone indefinitely." "Then let's ensure it's not indefinite." Thornton extended his hand. "I believe we can win this, Mr. Blackburn." The return to Silver Creek was the longest ride of Zeke's life, his mind torn between hope and fear. Emma was waiting when he arrived, her face anxious as she searched his expression for an answer. "He thinks we have a chance," Zeke told her, dismounting. "But I'll need to surrender myself while they review the case." Emma's breath caught. "For how long?" "A month, maybe more." He took her hands in his. "I won't do it if you don't want me to. We could leave the territory, start fresh somewhere else." "Running isn't freedom," Emma said softly. "And I want our daughter to know her father's real name." The words stopped Zeke's breath. "Our daughter?" Emma's smile was tremulous. "Sarah may not be mine by birth, but she's mine in every way that matters, and I want her to be yours too, legally and completely." Zeke pulled her into his arms, overcome with emotion. "I want that more than anything." "Then we fight," Emma whispered against his chest. "Together." The next morning, as dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, Zeke held Sarah while Emma prepared breakfast. The baby, now nearly 8 months old, babbled happily and patted his cheek with chubby fingers. "Pa, pa, pa," she said clearly, her blue eyes fixed on his face. Emotion swelled in Zeke's chest as he cradled her closer. "That's right, little one, Papa's here." Emma turned from the stove, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "She's been practicing." Zeke held the child that had changed his life, this miracle that had somehow softened the hardened places in his soul. He remembered that moment in the desert, holding her for the first time, whispering words that had proven prophetic. "Guess God knew exactly what I needed," he murmured. 3 weeks later, Zeke Blackburn stood before the territorial court in Tucson, Emma and Sarah watching from the gallery as his case was presented. Andrew Thornton argued passionately, presenting witness testimony and evidence of the dead man's history of violence. When the governor's representative announced the decision to vacate all charges against him, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Emma's joyful sob reached him across the room, and Zeke felt the weight of 5 years on the run finally lift from his shoulders. Outside the courthouse, with Sarah in his arms and Emma at his side, Zeke faced the future as a free man. "What now?" Emma asked, her hand finding his. Zeke looked at the two people who had given him back his humanity, his purpose. "Now we go home and build the life we want, together." 1 year later, on a crisp autumn morning, Zeke stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Emma hang laundry in the yard. Sarah toddled around her feet, chasing butterflies and giggling. The garden was abundant with late harvest, and a small herd of cattle grazed in the distance, the beginnings of the ranch he'd dreamed of building. Emma looked up, catching his gaze, her hand moving to rest on the gentle swell of her belly. Their second child would arrive with the spring, another blessing he had never dared hope for in his years alone. "What are you thinking about?" Emma called to him, smiling. Zeke descended the steps, crossing to his family. He scooped Sarah up with one arm and wrapped the other around Emma's waist, drawing them both close. "I'm thinking that some men search their whole lives for treasure," he said, kissing Emma gently. "And I found mine when I wasn't looking." Sarah patted his cheek, demanding attention. "Papa's soft," she declared with the simple wisdom of childhood. Emma's laugh mingled with his as they stood together in the golden light. "Yes," she agreed, her eyes full of love. "Papa is definitely soft." And in that moment, surrounded by the family he never thought he'd have, Zeke Blackburn, once the hardest of men, knew with absolute certainty that softness was the greatest strength he'd ever found.